Louisiana, 1945. A train slows down on a humid afternoon. Inside the boxcars, German women press against the wooden slats, trying to see the platform ahead. Their hands shake. Their hearts race. For weeks, they've been told what's coming. The Americans will show no mercy. They'll torture prisoners. They'll take revenge for everything Germany did. The propaganda had been clear about this. These women expect the worst moment of their lives.
But when the doors slide open and they see who's waiting, something breaks inside them. Not from fear, from complete confusion. The soldiers standing in perfect lines on that platform, rifles held easy, faces calm under the brutal sun, are black. Every single one of them. And according to everything these women learned in school, everything their teachers told them, everything they saw in films and posters, this shouldn't even be possible, when everything they knew was wrong. Let me take you back 3 weeks. Greta Hoffmann stands in a muddy camp outside Cherbourg, France. She's 32 years old, a nurse who spent the war treating German soldiers from Poland to Normandy. Around her are 200 other women, teachers, factory workers, telephone operators, a violinist from Hamburg, all of them captured when the Allies pushed through France. They're waiting to die. That's what the propaganda said would happen. Americans execute prisoners, especially women who helped the Reich. But they don't get executed. They get medical checkups. They get delousing powder. They get gray dresses with POW stamped in black paint. Those 2 letters feel like they're burning into their skin. Then they're loaded onto a ship. The crossing is hell. Dark, cramped, the constant roll of waves making everyone sick. Women pray quietly, holding photographs of children they think they'll never see again. Greta keeps a diary hidden in her sleeve. She writes by moonlight through the porthole. March 12th, 1945. They say we're going to America. I can't imagine what America will do to us. The ship reaches New Orleans and the heat hits like a punch. Not normal heat. This is wet, thick, alive. It presses against your skin and fills your lungs. Palm trees sway. The sky is so blue it hurts to look at. Women stumble down the gangplank, blinking in light that comes from everywhere. And that's when they see them black soldiers lining the entire dock. This is the first real shock. Most of these women have never seen a black person in their lives. In Nazi Germany, black people only existed in propaganda films that called them animals. Posters that showed them as monsters. The women were taught that black people were dangerous, savage, barely human. One poster Greta remembers showed a gorilla in an American uniform. The caption said, "This is what liberates you." But these men aren't monsters. They stand perfectly still, professional. Their uniforms are clean and pressed despite the heat. They hold their weapons loosely. There's no threat in how they stand. Then Greta sees something that cracks her world open. An older German woman stumbles on the gangplank. A black soldier steps forward and catches her arm. His hand is gentle. He helps her down carefully. Then he steps back. Greta stares. This one moment contradicts everything she was taught for 32 years. They load the women into open trucks and drive north. The landscape is like nothing they've ever seen. Flat land stretching forever. Strange trees covered in gray moss that hangs like curtains, swamps everywhere. Rivers the color of rust. Everything feels both beautiful and scary. "Where are they taking us?" Lisa Müller whispers in German. She's 19, worked as a telephone operator in Munich. She's still young enough to think maybe someone will rescue them. Nobody answers because nobody knows. The black soldiers driving don't talk to the prisoners, but their silence isn't mean. They just drive. When the heat gets really bad, they pass water canteens back. One soldier notices a woman about to pass out. He stops the whole convoy and parks in shade until she feels better. These small kindnesses confuse the women more than cruelty would. They don't know what to do with kindness. from people they were taught to fear. The camp appears through pine trees, rows of white wooden buildings, wire fences that look almost decorative compared to the heavy steel and concrete of German camps, guard towers with soldiers inside reading newspapers, smoking, looking bored. Then the women see who's in charge. The camp commander stands on the headquarters steps. He's a black man, Captain Robert Hayes. His uniform is perfect. His face shows nothing. Back in Germany, this would be impossible to explain. A black man in command. A black man with total power over white prisoners. It doesn't fit anything they know about the world. "You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention," Captain Hayes says through a translator. His voice is steady and formal. "You will work, you will be paid, you will be fed, you will not be harmed. Follow the rules, and life here will be tolerable." The women stand in the sun trying to understand paid, fed, not harmed. It has to be a trick, some kind of American game before the real punishment starts. But they're dismissed to their barracks. Inside, the buildings are simple but clean. Wooden bunks, thin mattresses, lockers for belongings they don't have. Screens on the windows keep bugs out. Fans push air around. In the corner, a radio plays American music. Jazz. Voices singing about love and moonlight. "This is how they break you," an older woman named Frau Kessler mutters, with comfort. Then comes the punishment. But the punishment never comes. Morning is 5 a.m. Roll call in the yard while mist still hangs in the trees. Black guards count them carefully, then send them to breakfast. This is the second big shock. They walk into the mess hall expecting watery soup, stale bread, the kind of starvation food that's everywhere in wartime Europe. Instead, there are trays piled with scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, butter, coffee with real cream. Greta stares at her plate like it might disappear. Around her, women sit frozen. They're afraid to touch the food. One woman starts crying silently, tears running through the dust on her face. A black soldier working the serving line sees them hesitating. He doesn't speak German, but he makes an eating motion with his hands. He smiles a little, then he moves on. Permission granted. The women eat like they've forgotten what food is. Some get sick from eating too fast after months of being half-starved. Others eat slowly, making each bite last. The bacon is salty and rich. The eggs are hot and soft. The coffee tastes perfect. Back in Germany, people are eating potato peels. Here, prisoners eat better than free Germans. After breakfast, they get work assignments. Some go to the laundry, some to the kitchens, some to maintenance. The work is real, but not crushing 8-hour shifts. Breaks. Constant water because of the heat. Supervisors who correct mistakes without being cruel. And everywhere, black soldiers guarding, working, living in their own barracks next to the camp. The women watch them constantly, trying to match what they see with what they were taught. These men play baseball in the evenings. Their laughter carries across the compound. They write letters home under pine trees. They sing while they work, these deep harmonies that sound ancient and powerful. One soldier carves wooden toys during his breaks. Little horses, dogs, birds with spread wings. Nothing matches the propaganda. Greta starts talking to one of the guards. Not exactly friends because there are boundaries, but something like respect between them. His name is Sergeant James Wilson. He's from Georgia. His hands have scars from farm work. His eyes seem to see more than most people. He fought in North Africa and Italy before guard duty, got wounded. Has a slight limp now. One evening, he catches Greta writing in her diary under a pine tree. Fireflies pulse in the gathering dark. "You writing about our cruelty?" he asks. There's humor in his voice. Greta looks up, startled. Her English is bad, but she understands the tone. "No cruelty," she says carefully. "That is the problem." Wilson sits on a bench nearby. Not too close, respecting the line between guard and prisoner. "What did they tell you about us?" About black folks? She hesitates, then decides truth is safer. They said you were not human, dangerous, that you would hurt us. Wilson finishes for her. Rape and murder. Yeah, we heard what you were told, but it's not true. They sit quiet, listening to night sounds, crickets, voices from the camp, wind in the pine needles. Why do you guard us? Greta asks. Why not white soldiers? Wilson laughs, but it sounds bitter. White soldiers for white prisoners. They figured black soldiers for the ones nobody cares much about. Guard duty isn't glory work. But you fought. You were wounded. Yes, ma'am. Fought for a country that won't let me vote back home. Fought for freedom while my mother still has to sit in the back of the bus. He pauses. But I fought, and I'll keep fighting because it's right. This answer is too complicated for Greta. A man fighting for a country that treats him badly. Guarding prisoners from a country that would have killed him just for existing. None of it makes sense with what she learned. In Germany, she says slowly, they would have killed you just for being alive. I know. And yet you don't kill us. No, ma'am. That's the difference between us and them. That night, Greta writes in her diary, I begin to understand we were lied to about everything. Not small lies. Lies so big they built a whole world, and now that world is falling apart, and I don't know what to believe anymore. The change. The change doesn't happen fast. It comes in small moments that pile up like water wearing down stone. A guard named Private Marcus Brown teaches younger German women to play baseball in the evenings. He's patient, shows them how to grip the bat, how to swing. He laughs when they miss, celebrates when they hit. His happiness is real and simple. Lisa Miller asks him why he's kind to them. Your people, he says. Being a prisoner doesn't change that. The camp has a library. The women find American newspapers and magazines. They read about concentration camps being found. They see photographs. At first, their minds reject what they see. Greta stares at pictures from Bergen-Belsen for 3 hours. She's shaking. But finally she accepts they're real. We didn't know becomes something women say over and over, like a prayer. We didn't know about the camps, but some of them did know, or chose not to know, or knew, and decided it wasn't their problem. The guilt settles over them like the humid air, heavy, everywhere, exhausting. The black soldiers never lecture them about it, never rub it in. They just exist, going about their work with quiet dignity. These men have every reason to hate. Germany's ideology said they were subhuman. America's own racism treats them badly, but they choose something different, some kind of professional compassion. The storm that arrived in late May didn't feel like ordinary weather. It roared in over the pines with the violence of artillery, shaking roofs and rattling windows as if the war had followed them across the ocean. Rain pounded so hard against the barracks that women sat upright on their bunks, trembling, their minds pulled instantly back to nights when the sky over Europe was torn open by fire. Lightning burst again and again, turning the room white, revealing every terrified face for a split second before plunging them into darkness. Someone cried out. Someone else whispered, "Not again, please, not again." Even Greta, who had spent months learning to steady herself, pressed her hands over her ears and curled inward, the old instinct to hide in cellars gripping her lungs. Then the door opened, and Sergeant James Wilson stepped inside, soaked to the bone, water dripping off the brim of his helmet. His presence filled the room like a calming weight. "Everybody all right in here?" he asked, voice steady, gentle even in thunder's shadow. He walked slowly down the center aisle, checking the bunks, making sure the leaks weren't flooding anyone's mattresses, offering to move women to the dry barracks if the roof worsened. When he reached Greta's bunk, he crouched slightly. She looked small in the dim light, shaking without wanting to. "Storms sound like bombs," he said quietly. I know. She swallowed hard. How do I make it stop? Wilson shook his head. You don't make it stop. You remind yourself it's not war anymore, just weather. Rain echoed through the walls like fists on a door. Greta whispered, Why do you care if we're safe? Wilson paused. Outside, thunder rolled low across the swamp. Because somebody has to stop the chain, he said. Somebody has to choose different. He stayed with them until dawn, boots dripping, eyes tired, posture steady, simply sitting near the door until the storm softened into a drizzle and exhausted women fell asleep upright against their bunks. The next morning brought humid air and the smell of wet pine. But it also brought something Wilson had sensed long before the first raindrop fell. Change. A rumor passed from barrack to barrack that a different group of female POWs, 30 or so, would arrive within the week. Overcrowding at another camp, behavioral issues. It depended on who you listened to. But the original women of Camp Ravenside felt the tension before the trucks even rolled in breakfast was quieter. Work was tense. And when Greta crossed the yard after her kitchen shift, Wilson passed by her with a clipboard under his arm. He didn't break stride, but he lowered his voice enough that only she could hear. Keep your women calm. New arrivals mean new trouble. He was right. The woman who tried to restart the war. The trucks arrived mid-afternoon, kicking up clouds of red dust as they growled through the gates. The women who stepped down from the flatbeds looked nothing like the softened, sunburned, half-healed prisoners Ravenside had shaped over the past months. These newcomers carried themselves stiffly, their faces carved out of something colder than fear, ideology still clutched like a shield. They scanned the camp with suspicion, disgust, and, worst of all, familiar certainty. They reminded Greta of the Germany she had left behind, a country that believed it understood the world because it had never questioned its own lies. Among them was a woman who seemed to pull the air around her into a hard knot. Tall, broad-shouldered, her blonde hair tied too tightly, her eyes sharp as broken glass. She stepped off the truck like she was stepping into enemy territory. Her gaze swept across the camp, over the pine trees, the white barracks, the black guards standing with relaxed discipline, and her lip curled. So this is what America calls victory, she said in German, loudly enough for everyone to hear. White women guarded by Negroes. Several of the newcomers nodded. A few of Ravenside's older prisoners stiffened. Greta felt heat rise in her chest. Anger, yes, but also shame at how familiar the woman's tone sounded. The newcomers fell into a loose formation, muttering among themselves. When Captain Hayes came to welcome them with his usual formal calm, they barely lifted their chins. Some refused to make eye contact. Some laughed openly. Hayes didn't react, but the guards standing around him shifted their stances subtly. Not in fear, but readiness. The woman introduced herself without being asked. Adelheid Kruger, she said sharply. Supervisor at the Kiel Armaments Factory, loyal citizen of the Reich. Hayes didn't flinch. You're a prisoner of the United States now, he said plainly. You'll follow our rules. Kruger's smile was thin and venomous. We'll see. From the start, she refused everything that suggested normalcy. She refused to line up behind black guards at roll call, stepping deliberately out of place so that Wilson or another sergeant had to correct her. She refused to eat while a black soldier was in the mess hall. She refused to take orders from anyone with dark skin. This is humiliation, she said loudly. Often, America thinks it can break German honor by putting us under Negro command. One evening, Greta overheard her in the yard telling younger newcomers that it was their duty to resist. If we act civilized, Kruger said, they'll think they can command us. We are Germans. We do not obey inferiors. A few older Ravenside women walked past her with tight jaws and down-turned eyes. Some had been nurses, teachers, mothers, Ordinary people who had survived enough to know that clinging to the Reich's fantasies would crush them. But the younger newcomers listened. They nodded. And little by little, the peace of Camp Ravenside began to crack. The confrontation came 3 days later in the laundry building during the sweltering noon shift. Greta was folding uniforms near the back when she heard raised voices. The kind of voices that weren't just angry, they were escalating. When she hurried toward the sound, she found Kruger standing rigid and furious in the center of the room while Private Marcus Brown held his hands open, palms out, in a gesture of calm. Brown was patient, steady, the kindest man in the entire camp. But Kruger was nearly spitting in his face. "You don't speak to me!" she shouted in German. "You don't order me!" Brown kept his voice soft. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside. You're blocking the walkway." Kruger suddenly shoved a metal bucket off the table. It clanged across the floor. Women gasped. Corporal Harding stepped forward. "Ma'am, please!" Kruger slapped his arm. Silence fell, the kind that makes the world shrink to a pinpoint. Harding didn't grab her. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Private, fetch the sergeant." Kruger smirked, believing she had scored some kind of victory. Minutes later, Sergeant Wilson arrived with 2 more guards. His expression was calm, but deadly serious. "Which one of you struck an officer?" he asked. Kruger crossed her arms with triumph. "He touched me first," she declared. "You have no authority over me. None of you do." She switched to English, her accent thick with contempt. "A German woman does not answer to Negroes." The sentence hung in the humid air like smoke. Even the machines seemed to stop. Greta felt the shame burn inside her, shame that she had ever believed anything resembling those words. Wilson did not raise his voice. "Captain Hayes will handle this." When the captain arrived, listening without interruption as Harding explained what happened, Kruger stood straight-backed, as if waiting for white authority to vindicate her. Instead, Hayes looked her square in the eyes. "You struck a guard. You disrupted operations. You defied lawful orders. You're going to isolation." Kruger's composure cracked. "Isolation? For what? Because I touched a Negro? This is outrageous." Hayes stepped closer until they were eye to eye. "If you had struck a white guard," he said quietly, "you'd have a broken jaw right now. The only reason you're still standing is because these men showed restraint." Kruger's face flushed with rage. Hayes nodded to the guards. 3 days, bread and water. After that, transfer to Fort Shelby if she continues." Fort Shelby. Everyone shivered. The guards escorted Kruger out, shouting all the while, her voice echoing through the pine trees. That night, the camp was silent, in a way Greta had never heard. No murmured conversations after lights out. No quiet laughter. Just the heavy breathing of women remembering the world they had escaped and the world they had helped build. Near midnight, unable to sleep, Greta stepped outside. The sky was clear again, the storm having scrubbed it raw. She found Wilson sitting on the steps of a dim outbuilding, cigarette glowing weakly between his fingers. She sat down beside him. "I'm sorry," she said softly, for what she said, for all of it. Wilson didn't look at her at first. He exhaled smoke slowly. "Fear makes people mean," he said. "Makes them cling to the lies that told them they were better than someone else." Greta wrapped her arms around herself. "I used to believe things like she said." Wilson nodded. "And you don't now. That's the difference." She looked at him. "Does it ever get easier, seeing people change?" He shook his head. "It gets necessary." They sat in the humid dark, fireflies drifting lazily over the grass, the camp quiet except for a distant guard tower radio playing soft blues. Greta finally stood. "Good night, Sergeant." He tipped his head. "Good night, ma'am." She walked back to the barracks, realizing something she had not understood before. The war might have ended in Europe, but the Germany inside some people wasn't done fighting.